hospital, some even waiting in their cars in Ahmedabad. Anguished cries echo through the corridors of the hospital. Meanwhile, rescuers are searching for missing people and aircraft debris in charred buildings in Ahmedabad. The black box of the Air India flight AI-171 has been recovered. It was recovered from the roof of the hostel mess building of Vijay Medical College. Of course, the analysis will provide vital clues about what triggered this disaster. Earlier during the day, Prime Minister Modi visited Ahmedabad. Prime Minister took stock of the situation at the crash site. He also met those injured in the incident at the Ahmedabad Civic Hospital. Authorities say they are working to identify victims, but the scale of destruction has made the task immensely difficult. Remember, barring one miracle survivor, no one else could be rescued. Former Gujarat CM Vijay Rupani was among those killed in the crash, and Air India has also confirmed that 241 out of 242 people aboard the flight have died. But what caused the London-bound Air India plane to crash in merely 30 seconds is the question that still remains unanswered. Of course, several theories are doing the rounds, and let's also take you through some of them. As the first theory states that perhaps there could have been a loss of lift. Experts are saying that perhaps possible loss of power during the aircraft's takeoff could have led to that loss of lift or even a loss of thrust. The second theory states that the landing gear was down. Experts are saying that possibly because of a mechanical or hydraulic failure, that landing gear was down. The third theory states that perhaps it was a bird hit or even a flock of birds. But experts are saying that no flames or sparks were seen from the engines if it was hit by the birds. Even the videos do not show or have managed to spot any birds around the aircraft. The fourth and an equally important theory states that it was a dual engine failure, and experts are saying that perhaps that dual engine failure could have been caused by a possible fuel contamination that could have caused these both engines to seize at the same time. While this has raised questions over the safety of passengers, many questions still remain unanswered. What are those? Will authorities provide a timeline to reveal the black box findings? Are authorities solely relying on testimony of the lone survivor, Mr. Ramesh, who remember is a British national? Are reports of technical glitch a day before flight even true? Now remember, the DGCA so far has ruled out the possibility of any sabotage, but will Air India's board meeting call for an internal probe? Questions are also being raised about the quality control within Air India aircraft as well. That includes the quality checks of Boeing. Should India seek an audit of all Boeing 787 flights? That's the key question that's also grabbing headlines now. Was this a pilot error or a flight glitch? Will the black box even shed light on all of those possibilities? Those are critical questions that we here tonight on The Right Stand will be looking into. And for that, let me introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm joined in by Mirza Faizan, in fact, Mirza will be joining us in just a bit, but Dr. Vandana Singh, who's the chairperson of the Aviation Cargo at Federation of Aviation Industry in India, Captain Kishore Chinta, who's the chief pilot at Sirius India Airline Private Limited, Bayan Sharma, who's the CEO of Shines Aviation, joining in. Thank you, Vandana, and the gentlemen for joining in. Vandana, if I could begin with you. If one were to weigh in on the theories, much has been spoken about, but I also want to take in a word from you that is it fairly nascent to also rule out the possibility of a sabotage?
Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. And no, I don't think it's nascent to think in that angle. In fact, there were two international channels who were in touch with me, and they were talking about the angle of cyber terrorism, the fact that the Operation Sindoor is still on a pause and then it's not yet concluded. The fact that we have had national security violations, we have had innocents who have died at Pahalgam, the fact that yesterday innocents have died. So that angle cannot be ruled out. Yes, it is at a nascent stage, but very much it is there, very much alive and very much a theory.
Captain Chinta, Thank you for joining in again today. Yesterday, we were in a conversation as well. What are those observations that have caught your attention in these 24 hours? Of course, there's been a lot of focus on the theory of a lack of thrust that could have possibly also led to that air crash. And, experts are talking about this as a more probable theory than that of, say, even a bird hit, because civil aviation experts have also highlighted that if there was a possibility of a bird hit, it could have been spotted in the videos that have been doing the rounds. Captain Chinta, that's for you. Can you hear me?
Good evening, and yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I
So
can.
over the last 24 hours, a lot has been said about lack of thrust or lack of power. We should all understand that the Boeing 787 is the pioneer of the best possible lift-generating wings, which are flexible, and the aircraft probably climbs like a rocket. We've all seen those beautiful air show videos where before the aircraft came into service, after takeoff, close to 90 degrees pitch. These wings would generate lift. I've heard various theories of the flaps not being lowered. All those are conspiracy theories which have no substance, because once the aircraft lines up for takeoff, there is no way the auto throttles can be engaged without the flaps being at the correct flap setting for configuration for that particular weight category and takeoff. So let's debunk all those theories about the flaps.
No,
but
okay,
yes,
okay.
For
My clarification, Captain Chinta, is there a possibility that any kind of technical failure could have led to the flaps not coming out or taking off?
If the flaps didn't come out, it would generate enough warnings in the cockpit even before you open power for takeoff. So this is one of the most advanced aircraft. The full authority digital engine control has 4 channels. Even if we say that, okay, there was an electrical problem, I've heard experts say maybe there was a thermal runaway on the batteries, that there was a prior problem on the 787. We've heard all those stories. But this aircraft has enough backup systems to give you adequate warnings even before you open auto throttles for the takeoff. The takeoff roll has been absolutely normal. The acceleration has been checked by most of us who've flown various aircraft. I've spoken to various pilots who've flown the 787. The takeoff roll acceleration has been absolutely normal. So after the aircraft lifted off is where the problem started. So between lifting off and the Mayday call, probably those 6, 7, 8 seconds, something has transpired in the cockpit, given enough warnings to the pilots to declare a Mayday. So whether that was a loss of engine power, engines not generating enough thrust. In fact, if you see the earlier video, one of the first videos which we saw had an audio of something like a drone, which is symbolic of the ram air turbine being deployed. The ram air turbine will automatically deploy the moment the electronic engine control sees that the engines are performing to their max thrust as they should for that particular weight category. So something caused loss of lift on these beautiful wings. Even without flaps, with 140,000 pounds of thrust, the aircraft will just climb out. The undercarriage being down is of zero significance if the engines were providing adequate thrust. Even if they were providing 50% thrust, it would still climb out, maybe at a more nimble rate. So the aircraft has come down in a very controlled manner. It seems like the pilots were continuing to raise the nose to generate enough lift on those wings. Whatever caused that loss of lift on those wings has to be identified. That will only come out when the flight data recorder will give us all the parameters which are possible for
I can see Mirza
finding out
who's an aviation expert and he's also worked on the design and development of Boeing 787, has joined in. Thank you for joining in. But before I come to you, I also want to go across quickly to Mr. Vayan Sharma. Sir, I think a very important point being made by Captain Chinta over there when it comes to the ram air turbine, the sound that the engines were making. Important to also highlight to our viewers why that sound of the engine could be also a very important clue for the ongoing investigation into this air crash.
See, this thing about the sound, I honestly have not seen a video in which I have heard any sound.
Okay.
So, it could be there. So basically, when you hear the sound, it tells you that your aircraft engines are operating, right? Whether they're operating at 100% or not at 100% is a moot point. That's something for, as we said, that what is clearly apparent is what is called loss of lift. That the aircraft, after it rotated and got off the ground, you're seeing that the aircraft climbs initially and then it sort of just wallows down and sort of settles down on the ground in a nose-up position. The issue is that there are 2-3 things here. One, immediately after takeoff, normally at you reach 50 feet, the pilot in command calls out to the co-pilot for the undercarriage to be retracted. Okay. You see, the undercarriage is not retracted for a considerable amount of time. And the pilot has called out an emergency. He has called out a mayday. Mayday call is given by the PIC only if we feel that there is absolute imminent threat to the aircraft or to the passengers. Which means that there was some problem which was identified. Now, today, right now, without the data being analyzed, you can choose your favorite theory and go with it, that what could have happened. One of the things is that, after it rotated, instead of the flaps, the undercarriage being retracted, the flap retraction happened. That's also a theory. Okay. But as I said, all of that we will know only after the data recorder is analyzed, when all those inputs which were given by the pilot at that time, how the aircraft was responding,
right,
all of that is analyzed. Only then we will.
Well, absolutely. Right now, there are only theories that are doing the rounds. I agree with you over there, Mr. Sharma. But I want to bring in Mirza. Right. And perhaps it's also too early at the same time to rule out certain theories, as Dr. Vandana was highlighting.
And there are no quick fixes.
Right. Mirza, that's why I want to bring you in on the point that's being made right now. I think what's important to also discuss is that till yesterday, early views coming in from the aviation experts was rather that of shock that it is a Boeing 787 that has met such a fate, because from what reports are indicating that yes, there may be crumbling confidence in brand Boeing, but 787 Dreamliner has been one of the most fabulous makes of the Boeing, as has been claimed by Boeing itself, several aviation experts as well. Were you shocked by this air crash? I'm sure you were.
Yes, Akanksha, I was definitely shocked because recently, last couple of years, after Boeing 737 MAX issues and crashes, Boeing has come under scanner, rightly so. And last year, Boeing Defense and Space spacecraft, Boeing Starliner, malfunctioned, and our Sunita Williams was stuck up in space for like 1 year. So yes, Boeing is under scanner. But the time at which this program was running, 787, I have worked on I'm an avionics guy, so I have worked on the design and development of PFDs, MFD, private flight display, multifunction display, flight management system, navigation guidance, and fuel control systems, and so on and so forth. In those days, early 2000s, Boeing was one of the best company in the world as far as the quality is concerned, as far as process procedures are concerned. Let me tell you how aircraft systems are designed. There are 5 categories of aircraft systems: level A, B, C, D, and E. Now, level A systems are those systems which, if fail, aircraft will crash. So there is a separate entire process and procedures and quality checks for level A systems, right? And one of the quality process which we follow, it's called DO-178C. And this allows us only to make 1 error in 1 billion. Now, your Six Sigma allows 3.4 error in 1 million, whereas DO-178B allows 1 error in 1 billion, which is an amazing feat to achieve as far as quality standards go. So then level B and level C, I do not want to get into the entire classification of systems.
Okay.
But what the point I'm trying to make here is, at that point of time, I've been a part of it. We have been following stringent quality checks, processes, checks, rechecks. Everything was being followed. So this is a stellar machine. And when this machine crashed, with this kind of situation.
Mirza, I want to bring you in on this point that when it was launched in 2011, experts have also highlighted that how the 787 Dreamliner was hailed for its fuel efficiency, its long-range capabilities, thanks to the advanced composite materials that are utilized in it. Correct me if I am wrong.
No, you're perfectly right. I mean, this is the first platform which used 80% composites, and it's the entire structure, right? Composites means stronger and lighter. So, and composites have, the breathing capability of composites. Every time the plane goes up, it breathes out and comes down in the atmosphere. It breathes in. So that is all multiple times better than performance for the previous platforms.
Okay.
So,
now I want to bring in Dr. Vandana Singh on that note. Dr. Vandana Singh, when you have a plane which is being hailed for its fuel efficiency, what is one to make of the theory of a possibility of a fuel contamination there?
Well, then you're questioning the maintenance. Then you're not really questioning the Boeing. You're not questioning the Dreamliner, but you're actually questioning what happened at Ahmedabad airport. There was an incoming flight. This is a machine that has to fly, and machines always fly. They are best when they are flying all the time. And this machine coming from New Delhi to Ahmedabad and then Ahmedabad to Gatwick. My question is, what then happened at Ahmedabad? What were the maintenance checks that were done? What did the engineering team do? Were all the regulations followed? Did all of the procedural things that happen before the checklist is done, load, trim, all of that, weight balance, load factor, everything, all of it, was it in order? This is my question then to the maintenance of Air India. Over to you.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very valid question that you've raised, which I'm going to also take up with Captain Chinta. Captain Chinta, many are already asking that this is also going to now raise fingers at the brand value of Air India, which perhaps has already been impacted. But the maintenance of the aircraft, at a time when it's looking towards establishing itself as a global brand, what does it speak? Captain Chinta, can you hear me?
Yes. I would say that one crash should not impact the brand Air India or
it's not just
their
one crash.
maintenance practices.
I beg to differ there. I don't think we can treat this as one crash. We're looking at the loss of lives.
What I'm saying, what I mean to say is, yes, it is a tragic crash. There's no taking away that fact. What I'm saying is that to rubbish the fact that maintenance practices were not followed, there are various checks and balances. I mean, it's easy to say that maintenance practices were lax or the fuel was contaminated. It's beyond my comprehension as a pilot, because there are various ways for the fuel filter bypass lines to pick up even the micro millimeter of contamination to give you enough warnings. There is an electronic engine control. There is FADEC. There's enough checks and balance. Yes, it cannot be ruled out that fuel contamination might have led to the engines shutting down. Is a possibility which will come to light as and when the flight data recorder, will give us all the parameters, and it will come to light. But as a theory, rubbishing the entire maintenance practices of an airline at the same day, probably a few hundred airplanes of Air India were flying. If their maintenance practices were so lax, all those airplanes should be falling out of the sky. On the same day, there were probably 50, 60 aircraft which departed from the same airport using the same fuel.
Mr.
If
Sharma,
fuel was
would you like to come
contaminated,
in?
it can't be
Would you like to
contaminated
come
just
in?
for Air India 171.
Okay, Mr. Sharma, would you like to come in on that concern that people are now raising regarding the maintenance practices being followed, especially in Air India?
See, that's exactly the point. What we're discussing here are what ifs. Okay. Trust me, whenever an accident happens, each and every part is looked at, investigated where the lapse happened. The complete maintenance data of this aircraft would be looked at. What happened before this flight, where all the checks done or not will be looked at. Whether the pilots, made the trim sheet properly or not, whether that happened perfectly or not, that would be looked at. So, right now we say, okay, that could be one of the cause, and we are already going to the conclusion that it's a maintenance issue. So now Air India is going to get a hit, on their reputation. That's not how it works. Okay, let's take a step back. Let's wait for data to come out. Okay, right now on a what if, your next thing is, we'll say, okay, fine, what if it's a pilot error? Then the next thing is we'll start questioning the complete training of all the pilots who are flying for Air India. It doesn't work like that.
Mirza, you as somebody who's worked on the making of Boeing 787, many are saying that it was the Boeing MAX air crashes that have in fact exposed the lack of safety of Boeing. But this particular air crash is very much different compared to that of the Boeing MAX air crashes. Why is that?
It is. 737 was a totally different story. Okay, I think all of us are aware of what all happened with the aircraft and what the problems were and how they got rectified later, whatever happened in that, and how Boeing actually conducted themselves during that whole process. Okay, that's out in public domain. Having said, you're not talking about an aircraft which was produced yesterday and suddenly you discover that there's something wrong. This aircraft has been flying the world over in India for the last 12, 13 years, absolutely with no problems, considered a proven workhorse. Okay. So today, if we suddenly, say that now, this aircraft is bad, I think that's, taking things a little too far.
No, I wanted to take that question also from Mirza. Mirza, how do you respond to concerns or rather the observations that this is an air crash which is very different compared to the MAX air crashes?
See, Akanksha, MAX air crash happened solely because of the MCAS system they introduced. It's a new system they introduced which actually overrides pilot instruction in some situation, and there was a clear design flaw in that system, right? Now this crash is totally different from this, and that's why they have to ground 737 MAX.
So there's no design flaw that's at least established in Boeing 787 Dreamliner.
Absolutely not. They're entirely two different systems, right? In fact, MCAS system does not even exist on 787.
All right.
It does not even exist. It was introduced from 737. It does not even exist on 787. How can we say we...
So for the benefit of our viewers, if you could just shed light on what were the flaws that were there in the Boeing MAX, which were not supposed or are completely not there, at least in Boeing 787.
So I'm going to put in a very layman language, try to not use the technical language. So it was one of the system which actually it was designed. In fact, they have taken cue from some of the previous accidents, but the design was had a flaw. That if the aircraft is going to be in a stall situation, the computer will bring the nose down so that the aircraft dive in to gain the speed and then come up, right? This was the system designed, right? A lot of aircrafts, for example, you may remember an air crash in 2009 going from Rio de Janeiro to Paris. That was Air France 448. It crashed in Mediterranean, and what happened is the aircraft stalled and the pilot never realized that. So getting inputs from these plane crashes, they designed this MCAS system, and what MCAS system was designed to do is that if it senses that the aircraft is stalling, it will put the nose down, pitch down and dive in. That was the MCAT system. Now what is happening, this MCAT system was getting wrong data, and it was wrongfully assuming that the aircraft is stalling. And even if the pilot does not want, the nose was put down and the aircraft dived in the sea. So that was the MCAS system, right? It is entirely different from, and as I said, the MCAS system does not even exist on 787.
I think that's a very critical point, which I'm sure the investigators will also be keeping in mind. Dr. Vandana Singh, I want to give you closing thoughts. Remember, whenever we talk about a brand in the aviation industry, the whole sole governing factor is the safety of the brand. On 2nd of June, there was a meeting between Prime Minister and, of course, several aviation executives where he said that India's booming aviation industry stands at a turning point, which is why I think it's very important to highlight how much of a pressure is not just on brand Boeing, but also on Air India right now.
Yes, I would say the same. As we speak, we have a duopoly with Air India and Indigo. The important thing is that we need to get more players in to increase to have a healthy competition over here in our Indian skies. That's number one. There is definite pressure on Air India to perform. There have been many incidents that have happened. I'm not talking of a crash here, where Air India has come into the light for all the wrong reasons, be it choked toilets, be it broken seats being given to ministers, be it so many the cases where I have also appeared on various channels. So Air India needs to up its act and up its game, be it that all quality checks are done, mandatory. There has to be rigorous, surprise checks as well that have to be conducted from time to time. And they have to get the act right. So Air India has to really sharpen its pencils.
All right, totally agree. And here's hoping that decoding the black box will also give us some very crucial clues to what exactly transpired in those moments before the crash. Many thanks to you, esteemed panelists, for joining in on the right stand. With that, we're now shifting focus over to the Israeli airstrikes on Iran. Early this morning, Israel conducted unprecedented strikes on Iran. Apart from civilians, the strikes killed senior military officials and scientists as well. And now the Iranian government has vowed to retaliate, as if there already was not enough going on in the Middle East, particularly with Israel's war in the Gaza Strip. Now, the United States, for its part, has denied collaboration in the Israeli attacks, but the US president has supported Israel's unilateral action. So by launching a so-called preemptive strike on Iran, has Israel effectively preempted the prospect of any sort of peaceful solution? Because the issue of whether or not the Iranians should be permitted to pursue a civilian nuclear enrichment program remains a concern. And with that, let's also take you through how the Israeli government justified these actions as necessary to prevent Iran from advancing its nuclear capabilities. In response, Iran has in fact vowed retaliation. Take a look at the key sites that have been struck as Tehran Research Reactor. This facility is known for its research and medical isotope production, was heavily damaged in the strikes. The Natanz enrichment facility, one of Iran's primary uranium enrichment sites, Natanz suffered significant damage, potentially setting back Iran's nuclear program. The Fordo enrichment facility, another critical enrichment site, Fordo was also hit, with reports indicating extensive damage to its underground infrastructure. The Bushehr nuclear power plant, the only operational nuclear power plant in Iran, Bushehr was targeted, raising concerns about potential radiation leaks as well. The Arak heavy water reactor was another site that was struck. This facility, which produces heavy water for nuclear reactors, was struck, causing substantial damage. Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center, this is a major hub for Iran's nuclear research and development. Isfahan was also targeted during these strikes. Let's also take you through all the losses that Iran has suffered apart from the strikes that happened on its key nuclear facilities. Its top leadership has been wiped out. Mohammad Bagheri, Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff, Major General Hossein Salami, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Commander, Major General Rashid, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps official, Mohammad Mahdi. He's a nuclear scientist who was also killed. In fact, Feridun Abbasi, who's a nuclear scientist, was also killed during these airstrikes. All right, I'm joined in by Leveran. We are also expecting other guests on the broadcast right now, but Leveran, let me tell you, is a columnist and former coordinator of the Israel-India Parliamentary Friendship League. Many thanks to you, Lev, for joining in. Lev, many experts are now questioning the escalatory nature of these strikes. There are a host of questions, but to begin with, what gives Israel the confidence to carry out these airstrikes on Iran, given that several security experts have said that Israel is not even having the kind of nuclear capabilities that Iran currently commands?
I think for most Israelis, once a very soft watchdog like IAEA wrote that Iran is not does not comply the nuclear safeguards, it was a matter of time before something should have happened. One thing that could happen is that Americans and Iranians, they sit in Oman and they reach an agreement. And then, of course, Israel is very obedient to America. Israel would do nothing. But once even the Americans gave up the Oman initiative, and they felt that the Iranians do not come to the negotiation table with a modest, humble way, but in a way that they are like a superpower and they have the right to have nuclear capabilities. It was a matter of time before Israel will attack Iran or Americans will attack Iran.
That's interesting. And I want to bring in Sushant Sareen, who I can see has also joined in. Sushant, thank you for joining in. But how do you weigh in on this entire airstrike that's taken place? Do you even call it a unilateral action, as Iran has suspected that this can't be a unilateral action? We've seen different kind of responses coming in. On one hand, you had the US president saying that while negotiations was on, he was against such a strike. On the other hand, in the most latest interview to ABC News, he's gone on to say that this was an excellent strike and that Iran was given 60 days. Today is the 61st, and that they should have come up with the deal.
Akansha, I think it's inconceivable to think that the Americans were not in the loop and to some extent were not complicit in these particular strikes. It just cannot happen, simply because, and these strikes have been spectacularly successful. I think Israel planned these very, very meticulously over months, if not years, and the way they have taken out the top leadership of the armed forces of Iran. They have struck all those facilities which they were targeting for or wanted to target for many years. And the fact that they have, in a sense, demolished or destroyed Iran's capabilities to strike back. We haven't seen any strikes from Iran as yet, apart from some drones which they've chucked. But even those had seemed to have come down, and we'll have to wait. I think 1 or 2 days we'll have to wait to see whether Iran has something left in its arsenal or only empty rhetoric. So Israel planned it really well. I think the Americans were very much in the loop. And I dare say, despite all the condemnations from some of the Arab states, I don't think they're going to be shedding any tears that Iran's nuclear facilities have been taken out and its nuclear program has been destroyed, number one. Number two, I think despite all their condemnations, they to some extent would be complicit in the airstrikes, at least that were carried out by Israel, because their airspace would have been used in most cases. There is no way, apart from the Syrian airspace, which is in a sense not defended anymore. Jordan certainly would have some, air defense systems. The Saudis would have them. And I'm sure some of those territories would have been brought into use. And yet, if the Israelis were able to carry out these strikes, then I would imagine there's been a wink, nudge kind of a complicity from some of these countries as well. They will obviously deny it in public. But how can such a strike, such an audacious strike, I would say, And I think this is what shock and awe looks like.
Absolutely. Audacious indeed. Lev, how do you respond to what the point that Sushant is making? Because many are saying that this is not just a win-win in terms of the damage that has been caused to Iran, not just in terms of the nuclear capabilities, but also in terms of the top military leadership. But do you also see this now with regards to concerns of a wider Middle East conflict? Is this now going to divide the Islamic world even further? Because you have the OIC nations, many of them are not standing by Iran's side. You have Jordan, you have Syria, yes, but do you see this now driving a wedge even further?
So the Middle East or West Asia is the mecca of the doublespeak. It doesn't matter what they say in the Emirates or Bahrain or Saudi Arabia. They are very happy that Iran was humiliated. There is no question about it. And for them, the Israeli nuclear capabilities is not a threat. They know that Israel is not an enemy of the moderate Sunni countries. And with many of them, we already have a formal peace. So if we compare what Iran was even 1 year back with the Assad family and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and what is Iran now, they hold a very sticky wicket. And they know that in a way, it is not only that they humiliated, in a way, Israel feels that even if Iran shows all its capacities, it was good to strike Iran.
Okay.
And maybe,
I'm sorry to interrupt you there. In fact, I'm getting in breaking inputs as we speak. Prime Minister Modi has responded, or rather reacted to the phone call that he received from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's taken to X to share what he's had to say. He's saying that I received a phone call from Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. He briefed me on the evolving situation. I shared India's concerns and emphasized the need for early restoration of peace and stability in the region. That's Prime Minister's message coming out loud and clear. I want to bring in Sushant. Sushant, Prime Minister's concerns, of course, go a long way, because remember, he's not only in the good offices of Israel, but also in the good offices of Iran, given our time-tested ties, how crucial Iran has been to India in terms of as a fuel supplier, also in terms of our energy needs. India did not give in to the kind of pressure that US had mounted on us when it came to meeting our own energy needs, especially from Iran. But having said that, the kind of message that's come in from Prime Minister Modi, what does it speak of India's concerns right now as this conflict carries the potential of spilling forward?
Akansha, one, I think the assumption that this conflict will spill over and into a wider Middle Eastern conflict, I have my doubts. I don't think the Arab states are wanting to get involved on the side of Iran. And the so-called axis of resistance that Iran had constructed has crumbled. Hamas is finished, Hezbollah has been virtually finished, Lebanon is not in the fight anymore, Syria, there's been a regime change, I don't think new regime. It's the Houthis left, but the Houthis also are able to strike at Israel on the basis of systems which Iran gives them. And if Iran doesn't have the systems to strike, I don't see what damage the Houthis can do. And in any case, they are not very popular with the rest of the Arab states. So I don't see this spill over into a larger conflict, but India's concerns are twofold. One is, of course, the fact that, we have to do some kind of monkey balancing between a very fabulous relationship that we have with Israel and, of course, a very important relationship that we have with Iran. So we'll have to do some kind of virtue signaling, some kind of monkey balancing. And frankly, I think everybody understands where we are coming from. Second is more serious, which is that even if Iran remains in the fray, there is a concern that our energy security, not just in terms of supplies, but also in terms of pricing of energy, which we buy from the Middle East, will spike. And that causes a problem for us. And we have a diaspora in the region. Plus, if trade routes start getting disrupted, then that's a third whammy for us. So there is that particular concern that we have on that particular part. But look, we are not buying any oil from Iran. We stopped that many years ago. after the US imposed certain sanctions, our oil supplies from Iran are virtually zero. And we've shifted our oil purchases to Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and some of the other countries. We are not buying much oil from Iran anyway. So Iran per se does not affect us. But if supposing Iran was to block the Straits of Hormuz, if that was to happen, it would impact on us. If the Houthis were to continue doing what they've been doing and escalate it to whatever extent they can, and the Bab al-Mandab, then that affects our trade flows. That's already started being affected. That's already raised costs for us. And then, of course, if other Arab countries are targeted, then we have a diaspora out there. Then that becomes a problem. But I don't see Iran attacking the other Arab countries, because that would be uniting everybody against Iran. And I don't think that's a very wise thing for Iran to do at this point in time.
Rather, it would be looking for support. We wonder where, the ones who are currently supporting Iran, whether it is Syria or Jordan. In fact, Jordan has, sort of distanced itself, but Syria is not even in a position to come to Iran's aid. But I want to bring in Lev on that part. Having said that, Lev, is Israel in a position to open a fresh new front? Because you already have the war going on in Gaza, and as I said, that those nuclear capabilities which Iran still has are not the case with Israel. For how long can you sustain this conflict without the US assistance?
The conflict in Gaza is a real domestic feud within Israel. We have a big chunk within Israel who says enough is enough. This war is for 1.5 years, and we need to bring back the hostages. And some pollsters even say that it is above 50% of Israelis who are against the current government of Netanyahu. But once we come to Iran, who actually wants the annihilation of Israel and has these capabilities, and really has this political libido to harm Israel, in this, let's say, in the basic politics of Israel, fighting Iran is a consensus. There is no, even I can say that Netanyahu was called it for many years, that he's so soft on Iran. So in a way, it is like a monkey on the shoulder of Netanyahu that he took off with this attack on Iran.
Professor Hamid Musavi, who is the Associate Professor of International Relations at the University of Tehran, has also joined in. Thank you so much, Professor Musavi, for joining in. How do you weigh in on the attack that's taken place? Many are saying that this is a sort of a double whammy. Not only is the military leadership wiped out, the senior ones, and of course the nuclear facilities, but this is also weakening Iran's position even further, given that Iran's allies have already been wiped out, largely whether it is Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis to a great extent.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. So I think the attack was very surprising. I think most people expected the Israelis to attack perhaps in the fall, after the snapback mechanism is triggered by the Europeans and the Security Council. However, right now, it was very surprising considering the fact that Iran-US negotiations were ongoing. And actually, Iran was scheduled for the next round of talks with the Americans actually on Sunday. So I think the Israeli attack actually killed any prospects or chances for diplomacy. Now, I know that Donald Trump has tweeted that, well, it's 61 days and 60 days have passed, but we have to remember that the original nuclear deal took 2 years to negotiate. So I think this attack has essentially wiped out any sort of negotiated settlement. Now, from here on, if Israel continues these attacks, I think the situation will escalate greatly, because Iran does not have any choice but to respond militarily.
Right. in fact, we're getting in some breaking inputs right now as we speak. What we are learning is that the International Atomic Energy Agency is all set to convene its extraordinary board meeting on Monday following the Israel attack today. And I want to bring in Sushant on that note. Sushant, the IAEA, of course, is going to be mulling over a response in terms of how they can censure Iran. But what is the role out here? Can IAEA sort of ease the tensions that only seem to be escalating by the hour?
No, I don't think so. I have serious doubts if the IAEA. I think it's again going to be a lot of the typical multilateral hand-wringing and virtue signaling from some of these groups. Maybe they will take a few pot shots at Iran, that Iran wasn't living up to its deal, wasn't living up to its commitment. But look, the point is, we just don't have a complete appreciation of how badly hit Iran's nuclear facilities are. So one is that. Secondly, what exactly is Iran's capacity to hit back? For the dilemma for Iran, and as an outsider, I can say that maybe Professor Musavi can shed more light. The dilemma for Iran is that if Iran does nothing, then there is huge problems for Iran, both for the country as well as for the regime. And if it wants to do something, what can it do? What is its capability? Does it have the missile systems to target Israel? Will it target, say, the American bases? If they target the Americans as they have been threatening, then that pulls in the Americans into a direct fight with Iran. Would Iran want the Americans to jump into a fight at this point in time? I have serious doubts. Would they want the Saudis, for example, if they were to attack the Saudis, would they want the Saudis or the Emirates or some of these other Arab states to jump in on the side of Israel, or even on their own accord target Iran? I don't think so. So if Iran does not have a long-range strike capability, then how does it fight with Israel?
Right.
It cannot send its troops. It can't send ground troops. That will be like a turkey shoot. So that is not possible. So Iran's options are kind of getting limited.
I want to bring in Professor Musavi on that note, because Professor, is Iran finding itself extremely isolated? I think Sushant has highlighted a very valid point over there. And look at the 2015 nuclear deal. Backing the United States are the only three European partners who are still part of the deal. You have the UK, you have the France, you have Germany, but and they are all pushing for this resolution against Iran. And as much as I don't know how much of a power does a multilateral resolution like the one that's going to be passed by IAEA have, but they're saying that it's going to be the strongest in 2 decades. What are the options for Iran right now?
Yes, I do agree with the other guests that Iran is in a difficult position. If Iran does not respond, then Iran's deterrence will be harmed. I mean, this was a very large-scale attack, and essentially Iran has no choice but to respond. But at the same time, I think Iran does not want a full-scale war. So it's very difficult to respond, but at the same time to keep it limited in a way that does not escalate. And at the same time, I think Iran does not want a war with the United States. Now, the Israelis have said that they fully coordinated this attack with the Americans. However, I think Iranian officials thus far have been very careful in not pointing fingers towards the Americans. And that's why I think an attack on American bases is very unlikely. Regarding the issue of allies, as you mentioned, Iran's relations with Europe right now are not very good. However, Iran does have the support of Russia and China. Now, that support is mainly in the Security Council, but we'll have to wait and see how successful Iran's attack will be.
Absolutely. I want to bring in one of the historic angles, and in fact, I want to also close with thoughts over there as far as Lev is concerned. Lev, many have been now going back and alluding to for nations that formed a pact of intelligence sharing, economic cooperation, even trade pact that goes all the way to the 1958 Pact of Trident that involved Turkey, Iran and Israel. What has really led to this kind of downhill as far as the bilateral relationship between Israel and Iran is concerned, not to forget the role that the United States has played, because remember, we all talk about how during the Cold War era, Iran was very much an ally to the United States.
As far as Israelis are concerned, we love the Iranians. And we love Iranian food and Iranian people. And when you meet Iranians in exile in London, in Paris, in Mumbai, in Pune, you see how easily Israelis and Iranians are getting as good friends. So as far as we are concerned, it is not the Iranians, because with the Iranians, we had a very good connection until 1979, sorry. It is the regime that is anti-Israeli, that is also anti-India as far as Kashmir is concerned. And with the regime, we have the problem. I think Iranians are still extremely popular in Israel.
Would Professor Musavi want to share his thoughts over there? Because I can't help but share these dates with you. Iran had supplied Israel with crude oil, particularly after 1967 Six-Day War, when many Arab nations imposed their boycotts on Israel, and it was Iran that had come to its rescue.
So yes, Professor, it's true that during the Pahlavi era, the relations were much better between Iran and Israel. But we have to remember, even during the Pahlavi era, Iran did not vote for Resolution 181 of the UN General Assembly, which wanted to partition Palestine. And actually, Iran voted against that with other Muslim countries. After 1979, of course, Iran-Israel relations had been much worse. But with regards to the issue of loving Iranians, I don't think the mood in Tehran, if you ask most people, they will not have a very positive view of Israel, especially with what was done last night.
Right.
There were civilian casualties, women and children also died. So I think it's a difficult situation.
I want to give closing thoughts to Sushant Sareen. Sushant Sareen, now, first of all, do you agree that it is United States that stands to gain out of this entire situation? Not to forget, particularly Donald Trump, who we've seen during his previous presidency, the kind of crippling sanctions he had imposed on Iran. And one can't help but, in fact, go back into history of what happened in 2017 up until 2019.
I think the people who really gain are the Israelis, because if they have been able to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, I think the Israelis can breathe a lot easier than what they have been able to do for many, many years while the Iranian nuclear program was going on. And secondly, if they've been able to take out some of the missile facilities and other offensive capabilities of Iran, then again, that's something that Israel will be very happy with. And then, of course, I would imagine that despite, like I said earlier, despite all their condemnation, many of the Arab states also, who were pretty spooked by Iran's nuclear program, they were trying to paper it over, trying to improve their relations with Iran, but nevertheless, they remained very, very concerned about Iran going nuclear. I think they would also be kind of happy about it. The US, of course, has a finger in every pie and a foot in every region. So the US, of course, will have its own axe to grind, fair enough. But I think by and large, the big loser, unless Iran can really pull off something, it's going to be the Iranian regime. Maybe not so much the Iranian people, but certainly the Iranian regime.
Right. It's also a day to remind the US president that America is first, and perhaps he also needs to be focusing on the protests that seem to be ballooning by the day within his country. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in on The Right Stand. That's all I have for you in this edition. Up next is Brass Tacks with Zakajik.
Why is it that the flight AI 171 crashed in less than 60 seconds? There are several theories doing the rounds, so let's quickly take you one by one through the same, and then we'll bring in our experts to decode it for you further. The first big theory, as is being speculated, is whether or not this was a result of a bird hit. In rare cases, bird hit may impact both the engines. So that's one big speculation. The second theory, which is being spoken of widely, is double engine glitch. Both engines losing power simultaneously, leading to this kind of a plane crash. Though aviation experts have pointed out very clearly that this is a rarity. Yet, it's not been ruled out completely. The third theory is that of fuel contamination. Fuel contamination could lead to fuel clogging, which could then result in engine failure. And the fourth theory, which is being spoken of widely, overloading. The crew has to correctly estimate total load of the plane. The total load of the plane is a combination of the fuel load, the passenger load and baggage load. Though this is a protocol, it's largely followed. So this is also something which is still in the realm of speculation. The load factor, though, is critical in summertime when air is thin. To decode this, to put this in perspective, DBS Gujral, former DG Flight Safety Acosta, is with us in the studio. Mr. Gujral, appreciate you taking out your time. Thank you for speaking to us here on CNN News 18. There are so many questions, Mr. Gujral, that Indians today are asking to the civil aviation industry, DGCA, pointed questions on how this could have happened. Because to our minds, this is unheard of. A plane takes off. Within 30 to 60 seconds, it crashes into another building and the plane could not lift off. We've spoken of four factors, sir. First up, what's your assessment?
Let me start with this, that an accident of this kind where an aircraft is taking off and crashes within seconds is one of the most rare, perhaps first of its kind in the world. And most of the accidents you would have noticed, they occur during the landing phase, right? Or sometimes we had mid-air collisions where the passengers died, the aircraft were destroyed. And in this particular case, as you have pointed out, there are 3-4 theories coming forward. It's sometimes very difficult to believe that a thing of this kind can happen, that the aircraft is perfectly fine, it is inspected, all checks are carried out during the transit. This aircraft flew from Delhi to Ahmedabad, and all transit checks as per the regulatory requirements were carried out, and then it was released for the flight from Ahmedabad to London. But surprisingly, up to the time of takeoff, there was absolutely no indication of any engine glitch or loss of power. The moment he rotated, rotation means the moment he started his takeoff, the problem started, wherein the pilot says that he is losing power, he is not able to lift, and as a last resort, he makes a mayday call to the air traffic control, and that was the last. And he has also recorded a message that he cannot lift, there is no power in the engines. Now, this is one very, I think, first case of its kind where both the engines have simultaneously failed. Now,
but are we certain about that, sir? The situation you're telling us would have been better than it was yesterday if one of the engines was working, or if this was not case of a dual engine failure?
If one of engine is working, at least you would have got the lift. The aircraft is designed in such a way that in the event of a failure of one engine, if he is in the cruise, he can continue the flight. There have been a similar incident in the past where an aircraft was coming from Hong Kong, and 2 hours away from Delhi, the pilot noticed that the right-hand fuel tank was leaking, and he didn't have enough fuel to make it to Delhi. So after making all calculations, he shut down the right-hand engine and he made a single engine landing at Calcutta. So what I mean to say is that if one engine is working, there is a risk, but it's minimized.
But we can't say for sure what could have been the reason for the engine
in this
failure. It
particular
could be any
case,
of the above.
The entire answer lies with the digital flight data recorder. Because the digital flight data recorder records every parameter that is to be observed by the pilot or by anybody who is a part of the crew. And it measures everything automatically without the interference of the pilot himself. Even the fuel flow, the lack of fuel, the quality of fuel, the quantity of fuel, and the the position of all the parameters as observed in the cockpit or elsewhere in the engines or elsewhere in the other parts of the aircraft. They are automatically recorded in the
Good evening, you're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zaka Jacob. A day after one of the worst air disasters in Indian aviation history, we can now confirm to you that 265 people are dead in the crash of Air India Flight 171 from Ahmedabad to London. 241 out of 242 people on board are dead. There was one miraculous survivor, Ramesh Vishwakumar, whose seat broke off from the rest of the plane, and the force of the crash was so much that he was thrown at least a few meters away from the main body of the plane, and then he unbuckled himself and walked out. There are also, in addition to the people on board that flight, another 24 people at least on the ground, many of them medical students, because remember, this flight crashed onto a building, a hostel mess for medical students. There are at least 24 of them who are feared dead. Prime Minister Modi was in Ahmedabad today. He met with some of the family members of the victims. He also expressed his deep anguish and grief. But 24 hours on the Blackbox, which is the most important instrument, it has been